as you might expect, when there's a new coach leading the way here for the Panthers, we've got a new defensive coordinator that gets added to the mix. We got Kevin Scherer. He comes into Georgia State from Georgia Tech, where he might know something about their week one opponent. He was the co-defensive coordinator there. What kind of style of defense can we expect to see here from Coach Scherer?
Yeah, I mean, he wants to run multiple fronts, 3-4, 4-3, wants to be able to kind of leverage that. Again, just as the offensive line increased in size, the defensive line increased in size as well. They really, really hammered the portal, going and getting 300-pound plus guys on the defensive line. Wants a ton of edge guys, outside linebacker rush ends as well. Significant amount of speed. Hit the JUCO ranks hard for that, trying to find guys that had tackles for loss, had guys that were productive in their previous stops. Got Bishop Thomas, former 4-star defensive lineman, signed with Florida State, then bounced out to Colorado. There's another guy that may have an opportunity. That he just kids like that of his size don't really come to Sunbelt programs unless there's issues before, and his issues certainly have been documented. But that was the one thing I think overall the staff did, is really, really try to leverage, find guys that had experience and production on the defensive side of things, in their previous stops, and done a really good job in kind of compiling that. I think there was probably 6 or 7 guys that had P4 experience, basically will be lining up on this defense. So that's certainly exciting to see if you're a fan of the Panthers. And I think for him, his year was a little strange last year, just because Brent Key, about midway through the season, demoted the previous defense coordinator, made him linebackers coach, elevated Scherer. From that, the defense did get better, but talent was an issue at Georgia Tech. It's one of the reasons why that defense was one of the worst in the country. They did improve. He wants to load up, stop the run, wants guys to fly around the defensive secondary. He said as much so far in spring, but ultimately you got to see what personnel he has and who can play in what positions in order to do it. But I think you're going to see a multiple front. You're going to see attacking, linebacking play. You're going to see some defensive backs be able to come up and pressure from that back third. And something he was able to do somewhat at Georgia Tech with some talent, but overall just the 11 just wasn't strong enough there. And I think for this level, certainly feels good about what he's rolling with to start fall camp.
Well, let's get to know a little bit of that personnel that Coach Scherer's defense is going to make up that Coach Scherer's defense. And let's start there with the defensive line. After the spring, they lost their sack leader in Javon Dennis to Memphis, plus they lost a few others in the portal in general. However, they bring back a good core group of guys in Henry Brandt III, Anthony Bloom, Fuchs Lewis II, and Corey Warren. How did the D-line look in the spring?
Yeah, I mean, they were, as you mentioned, it's going to be a brand new group. There's some names. I mean, Bryant's solid player, guy started his career at Louisville, kind of been that plug there, defensive tackle, nose guard. But you have a lot of guys have been added to that group as well. As I mentioned, Bishop Thomas a little earlier, Cam Williams on the outside, Victor Brown from Louisville as well, a guy that's from the Atlanta area. That just didn't play a ton there at Louisville, but again, 6'4", 250. They can play that defensive end edge spot. He was in spring as well, so I think you're going to see again a lot of guys rotate. That was the big thing that we kind of heard all through spring is just the need, want to improve the depth. That was a priority this offseason and going and getting guys. As we know, successful teams, high level teams, they want to be able to rotate 8, 9, 10 guys on the defensive line with regularity, not to burn out anybody, get anybody fatigued, and just be able to, kind of pin their ears back and fire off on the quarterback.
Yeah, and like you said, to bring it in a lot of depth, if I'm counting right, and who knows if I got all the transfers right, but I think there was like 7 guys that they brought in on that defensive line before the spring, after the spring, even Dorian Royal that kind of came in mid-spring. So, yeah, they bring in a lot of depth. So, obviously, you want the depth at the offensive and defensive line and keep people fresh and looking good there in the fourth quarter. Let's move over to the linebacking group. They lost their leading tackler from a year ago, Jontre Hunter. He's off to the NFL. They also lost Jordan. Is it Venzela?
Venziel, yep. He graduated.
Venziel. And then you got Shamar McCollum. They all graduated. However, they bring back a good core group, just like the defensive line from last year. You got Justin Abraham. He was their second leading tackler last year. You got Josiah Robinson, Kevin Swint. How did this group look in the spring?
Yeah, I mean, same deal there. I mean, you got some experience there. Swent's played a ton of football. Abe's played a ton of football. Guys that, are comfortable, go out there and basically any defense alignment, they're going to go out there and fly around. I definitely think that, got faster this offseason as well. You mentioned Josiah Robinson. He's a guy that, kind of was a safety rover before and kind of plays that inside linebacker role. He can, slide around inside, outside. If you got, an odd front, even front, be able to move guys around, there as well. So it's really interesting. They went to West Georgia up the street and going Division II to get Xavier Robinson, another guy that kind of fits that inside linebacker guy that can run around and hit and really hit. Kept which was a little bit surprising, but two local Georgia kids in Brent Washington who just are missiles, and Jacoby Jones as well, guy from Forsyth, Georgia. So they do have more experience than some of the other position groups, but you're going to see a lot of new faces there as well. Guys that were brought in, Katie McDaniel brought in from UCF, going and getting guys in the transfer portal, really just to plug and play and jump in, again, right away and have the opportunity to play. I think you're going to see a lot of names that maybe folks didn't necessarily hear or didn't expect to hear in the spring. But again, reps up for grabs, as we've mentioned. That's going to be probably the theme of the majority of fall camp.
You mentioned Xavier Robinson from West Georgia, and they brought in like a lot of other transfers. Do you see any of these transfers potentially making a huge impact, or are they more like depth pieces here in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately just, depends on how fall camp shakes out. But, you got guys that have played a ton, guys that are coming here for their last year. You always want to make an impact. You're not coming to sit on the bench your last year there. Another guy that's extremely interesting story is Daniel Humailia. He started his career at Arizona, another super highly ranked guy. He was productive at Arizona, but had some moments. But no, there's plenty of opportunities there. Look at Daniel potentially, but Swint's the guy that started his career at Clemson. He obviously was a representative there for Georgia State at the Sun Belt Media Days. Talked about basically wanting to end his career in a major way with tackles for loss, sacks. Again, I feel good about the linebacker room. Certainly not only moving forward, but what has basically been acquired.
The defensive backfield took two big hits. You got Brykese, right? Brykese Brown transfers. Brykese goes over to Boston College, yeah, and you got Tavie Leach. He graduated, but much like the linebacker room, and the secondary brings back a good group of guys like Jeremiah Johnson, Gavin Pringle, Isaiah Guy, Ronald Cooper, Cody Jones. There's a whole bunch of other guys. Like, this is a pretty good room. How did this look? How did the room look in the spring?
Yeah, to be same as before, same story, just different verse. There is talent, as you mentioned, guys that have played some significant snaps. Gavin Pringle is one of the best players in the Sun Belt. Last year, super productive guy, come up from the FCS ranks. You add a guy like Kenyatta Watson as well that came from Georgia Tech, started his career at Texas. Big size. That's the one thing that I think this offseason has really come about from the defensive secondary. That kind of was another question mark ultimately. It got more solidified, having guys, the safety position, corner position that can play. Jeremiah Johnson was a guy that was recruited as a corner, moved back to safety, super comfortable there. Isaiah Guy, as you mentioned, got an opportunity last year as a redshirt freshman, played well in the bowl game as well. Have an opportunity to do it. So while some experience went out the door, there's certainly guys with some talent, longer defensive backs. That was a priority certainly of this offseason as well, getting guys that can get out and run in space and just really be able to defend all levels. In the Sun Belt. As we know, there's some talented playmakers in the Sun Belt. So that's an area that I think went from maybe a question mark or an area of potentially a weakness to could potentially be a strength, as the Panthers open up camp.
All right. Well, if you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season here in 2024, who are you picking?
Yeah, I like Kenyatta Watson. He didn't play a ton at Tech for whatever reason, and again, as I mentioned, started his career at Texas, playing for a hometown team. His dad was on the staff at Georgia Tech as well, so there was some question marks about why he wasn't playing. I think he's a day one starter here in Atlanta. Guy that's going to absolutely be able to put a stamp on this defense and being the guy, being able to play in that defensive back third and really a tone setter. I think, he's definitely a guy that I have circled that wants to line up against this former team. Several other former Georgia Tech guys are on this roster as well, and get some payback and some ups and knows what they're running over there on the offensive side of the ball as well, which is always valuable.
Well, with the fall camp coming up here next week, what position group or groups do you feel is the most concerning heading into camp?
I think most unproven, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, was probably wide receiver. I think you still have a lot of questions on the offensive line because you lost a ton of experience. Well, there's talent and unproven talent. I think defensive line's pretty solid. Secondary solid, linebacker solid. I'd probably lean a little bit toward the wide receiver room at this point, just because you have so many questions about guys that haven't really played significant reps, and they're going to be shoved into to play more reps than they probably ever played in their career.
Well, what would you say is the main strength of this team?
I think ultimately, the defense got significantly better on all three levels. I think the talent, top to bottom, from line, linebackers, and defensive backs, is significant. I think that's the one thing in the Sean Elliott era, you really didn't have a great defense. This was a defense that was bend, don't break. They were kind of run a 3-4 scheme that some offenses will be able to pick apart. I don't think those days, are here anymore in Atlanta. I think you have size all over the place. I think you have speed all over the place, and really, really guys that are going to get after the quarterback. This defensive team had playmakers, but as a unit, just were kind of leaky in key spots, and I think that will get buttoned up pretty quickly in the fall, and I think folks will be able to see that in September.
Well, now I kind of want to shift gears and talk about the NIL and McGee and what he's kind of meant for Georgia State. And I think there was a quote that either we were talking before or that it was from him. That's like, we're recruiting two places. It's the state of Georgia and the state of Atlanta. Like, not just the city of Atlanta, the whole, he referred to it as a state. Can you tell me what he has meant in terms of NIL and getting new players and the retention of existing players when he came in, how that's all impacted Georgia State? Yeah,
just prioritizes it. Really just changed, complete sea change here, making NIL priority. Georgia State only has one collective. It was relatively new, started in September. And to be candid, there just wasn't a culture of giving and fundraising, really. And Dell has basically said, look, this is how this program moves forward. We saw the previous coaching staff, win basically on average, being able to go to a bowl game about every year. But if this team and program wants to elevate and go and compete for a Sun Belt championship, ultimately that's where you're going to have to come and raise money and keep money in the program. I think at last check, they were right around $320,000 basically that have been raised since the beginning of the year. And I know there's significant and aggressive goals as well to try to get that number up closer to $500,000. For folks in the group of five, that's a tremendous amount of money just to be able to retain and recruit players and try to keep high level recruits as well in the state of Georgia, because these kids are getting offers from much bigger programs, Power 4 programs, and that goes back not only to the relationships that Dell and his staff have built with business owners, with folks here in the Metro Atlanta and Georgia area, but folks that want to see him succeed. And I think that's a big part of it as well. Being able to find those folks that maybe were disconnected or not necessarily attached to Georgia State in previous seasons. That's the one thing that I kind of remind folks all the time is this program has basically only existed since 2009. So you don't have a generation of fans. I have a 15-year-old in my house. The program's as old as she is. So you're not going to have generations or folks that they're knowing they're going to games and contributing. And honestly, the program started about bumpy, right? You went 6-5 in year one. You went through the FBS transition, not winning a whole lot. That completely crushed any momentum in terms of fan base. But Dell has really ignited that and said, listen, this is going to we're going to need certain things to be successful. We're going to need folks to show up. We're going to need folks to invigorate the city of Atlanta. And really, in a super crowded marketplace here in Metro Atlanta, being able to be, get a bigger megaphone, get over there, wave their hand and say, hey, we're here to make an impact and make a statement while, basically existing within the fabric of the city. So he's embraced the new Atlanta, kind of hashtag there on social media. His staff is full of guys up and down all around that are familiar with Georgia and recruiting there. I know several members of his recruiting staff are former Metro Atlanta high school products as well. That's a huge priority of him as well, to be able to walk in to basically any school in the state of Georgia in Metro Atlanta and have a presence, have a face. And those high school coaches know and can trust them with the kids that they've got. And in the past, where they may have pushed them out of state and into bigger programs and things like that, Dell's winning those battles right now.
Well, it seems more and more like the demands of the head coach are really turning into more of this general manager role. You've got to recruit incoming freshmen. You've got to keep your own players almost like game by game, it seems like. Then there's the fundraising aspects and kind of moving away from the X's and O's. What trends have you seen there in the short time with Del McGee? I know we talked about the fundraising and stuff like that, but have you seen like the staffs increase, or what have you kind of seen there at Georgia State?
Yeah, he's more than doubled the staff, support staff as well. You mentioned general manager, reached out, got Hugh Jackson onto the staff as well, the NFL fame. With Jackson State, Tennessee State, a couple of places, stops in the college ranks as well. So he brought him in to kind of get that side of things more organized, player personnel, building out that staff. The recruiting staff is more than doubled as well, putting the priority, making sure all portions of his program are headed in the right direction. Everything's aligned, kind of moving where it's supposed to be. And as you mentioned, going and recruiting and kind of getting the tenor of your current staff, current players, current roster, see, what's going on there. That increases staff, just to support staff as well, to really know what's going on. It's a battle with every single coach, obviously, at any level. And some coaches are, kind of tapping out of that. They don't like it. They don't like folks coming out and trying to pillage their players. Dell understands that there's going to be some of that as well, and letting the kids know and being brutally honest with them. Look, if you go and you have an opportunity to a bigger program because you go and have a fantastic year, that's certainly your choice. We'll do everything we can to keep you. But if not, we're going to go and try to replace your spot with a as talented or more talented player as well. So he's trying to out-recruit every single class. And right now they have the number one class in the Sun Belt for the 2025 class. And I certainly don't see anything slowing down on that front.
Well, given all the changes in the coaching staff and player personnel, what does success look like for the Panthers here in 2024?
Yeah, I think ultimately the floor is a bowl game. I think that's looking at the schedule. I don't think that's completely out of reach. I think I've seen some Vegas books put in the win total about 4.5, 5. I think that's a little low. The last few years have kind of been that same way. I mean, Sean Elliott won 7 games last year. They started out basically 5-1. Roared out. With a super favorable schedule. I think there's certainly an opportunity for wins in September. First week one, obviously against Georgia Tech, would be a massive upset. But candidly, one of the biggest games in the program history. Playing to downtown Atlanta team just for leverage that. So many Atlanta kids up and down the roster there. So many ties. Former Tech assistants. Georgia State's got former Georgia State assistants and Georgia State players on their roster as well. So that will be fun. Vanderbilt, if you're going to knock off an SEC team, certainly have an opportunity to do that at home in week 3. But I think a bowl game, certainly the Sun Belt East has turned over a lot. The Sun Belt is a meat grinder week in and week out. But I think from an opportunity to win, at minimum 6 games, I think it's definitely right there in front of it. And anything on top of that would be significant gravy on top of that as well for Dell to make his statement. And then again, just going and trying to attack the offseason and showing, hey, look, we want to be able to hit that next level, want to move forward and see what can happen. And I can tell you that this staff is not operating like a team that's got their head in the sand or looking to build for three or 4 years from now. They want to win now. They want to go out and try to compete and win the Sun Belt East.
Well, we've talked about everything from coaching changes to NIL to recruiting. Is there anything else that you want to share or think that we should know about this 2024 Georgia State Panther football team?
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Downtown Atlanta, folks that have paid attention to Georgia State, it's always interesting too with the video game coming back out. They were a pick to click for a lot of folks going and wanting to play in the former Turner Field, home of the Atlanta Braves, and of course Olympic Stadium has been renovated there in downtown Atlanta. No, it should be a lot of fun. Glad it's clicking closer and closer. We'll be here a few short Saturdays no, should be a fun year. And as you mentioned, a lot of transition, but a lot of optimism certainly coming out of downtown Atlanta at this point.
Well, Ben, thank you for sharing your time and knowledge with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
All right. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you for all your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.